I thought betrayal was something that happened to other people, until I watched the woman I loved unravel everything we built, one lie at a time. What I did next, even I didn't see coming. I didn't see it coming, not even close. But oddly enough, I respected her for facing it head on instead of dragging things out. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. Was I upset? Absolutely. Confused? Without a doubt. But did I plan to stand in her way? Not at all. Michael, I'm not being irrational here, she said with a strange calmness. If you think it's necessary, talk to a lawyer. All I'm asking is that you keep covering college for the kids. As for me, I don't need much, just my clothes and some jewelry. That was all Anna wanted. And I just sat there, saying nothing, gripping that untouched divorce packet like it might dissolve if I held it long enough. She'd already packed up her things apparently, though I hadn't even noticed. I was too out of it to process any of it. Still, she kept talking, fast and shaky, trying her best to sound steady, but it didn't quite land. Her voice was a constant flow of nervous energy, like she was scared silence might swallow her whole. I glanced down at the papers again and, oddly, felt the corner of my mouth twitch into a half smile. Guess she caught it because she suddenly sped up her words like trying to outrun my thoughts. Without saying much, I stood up and casually tossed the envelope onto the coffee table. You can go now, I told her, not cold, just, done. I get it. She paused in the doorway like she might say more, but instead turned and walked out. That was it. She was gone. I grabbed a cold beer from the fridge. Number 1 turned into number 2 in about 10 minutes. That's when I glanced at the folder she'd left behind. Just like she promised, everything was organized. Neat. Tidy. She even handed me power of attorney to sell the house, which we'd refinanced not long ago to help pay for Brandon and Tyler's college. The market being what it was, selling now wouldn't even cover the closing fees. And still, here I was trying to wrap my head around why a 20-year marriage just crumbled. The answer, I guess, starts with her old flame, Jason. Anna and Jason had history. Long history. They were together way before I entered the picture. She used to mention him from time to time, just little things. And every so often, someone we knew would bring up his name too. I never gave it much thought. I mean, everyone has a past, right? Now I realize, he wasn't just an ex. He was the ex. The one who never really went away, not in her heart at least. As the sun dipped low and the room grew dim, I fumbled to switch on the lamp and ended up knocking over a stack of empty glasses. Of course. Then came the doorbell. Oh great. What now? I grumbled under my breath. It was Grace, Anna's sister. Michael, I just heard. Billy told me everything. I thought I should check on you. She stepped inside, her expression somewhere between worry and hesitation. Grace had always had this warmth, this steady presence. If I'm being honest, I'd always felt something for her, maybe even more than I ever did for Anna. I must have been tipsy to let my mind go there, especially considering Billy's my closest friend. But in that moment, I didn't know what I felt anymore. I shook my head, trying to push away the thoughts that were starting to creep in, thoughts I knew better than to entertain. Get a grip, I told myself. Now's not the time to lose it. Grace gently nudged me toward the kitchen, her hand light on my back. I resisted at first, not out of stubbornness but because it felt weird having someone take care of me. I wasn't used to that, especially not from her. The overhead light was harsh, too bright, and I found myself squinting against it. I didn't say anything though. Instead, I tried to focus on the number of beers I'd downed, running a mental tally. I was halfway to the coffee pot when I noticed she'd stopped talking. Feeling any better now, Mike? Can we talk about what happened? She asked gently. Just give me a sec. I need to hit the bathroom, I said, needing the brief escape. When I got back, she'd already poured me a cup of coffee. Thoughtful as ever. So, Grace, I said, settling into my seat, the cup warming my hands, tell me what you know. My wife and Jason, how long has that been going on? She looked down for a moment before answering. Honestly? I only found out about it earlier today myself. I sighed, the kind that carries a little too much weight. Mike, be kind to yourself, okay? She said. I always had this feeling she never really got over him even after you two got married. Would have been useful to hear that 2 decades ago, I muttered. To tell the truth, I didn't want to get involved in something messy, she admitted. I thought she'd let him go eventually. You always seem to get along well with her, I said, not accusing, just wondering. Grace shook her head slowly. It wasn't as perfect as it looked from the outside. Looking back now, I think our relationship was always more polite than passionate. I gave what I could, flowers, chocolates, the occasional surprise, but those things never really moved her. She didn't care much for grand gestures. Still, somehow we got along. We didn't fight much. I never truly reached her. I reached over to grab a couple of oatmeal cookies from the jar behind her. All right, sister-in-law, I said with a dry smile. Then tell me, why'd she leave me? Grace took a breath and nodded. Do you remember when Jason dropped out of college to enlist in the Air Force? I nodded. Yeah. That was right around the time I started seeing Anna. Exactly, she said. Anna and Jason had a history. He was her first love. She was crushed when he left. She was ready to start a life, settle down, maybe even have kids. And when he bailed, well, I think she looked to you to fill the gap. So I was the safe option, I said flatly. Someone to help her build the life she wanted when he couldn't. I think back then she believed she was making the right choice, Grace said. But I don't think she ever really stopped loving him. And I don't think she knew he was coming back either. So why now? I asked, almost afraid of the answer. 20 years in the service, she said. Jason just retired. He left with the rank of major, and Anna told me he's got a solid pension and a ton of job offers lined up. She was practically glowing when she talked about it. It was like she was proud of him. Not just proud, like she was somehow part of his success. I looked at her, trying to read between the lines. Proud? Or infatuated? She hesitated, then said quietly, a little too proud if you ask me. I guess she's living with him now. That's what it sounds like. Grace told me he's renting a place over in Berkshire Heights while he looks for a house to buy nearby. She said Anna moved in about 3 weeks after he got back into town. Apparently he called her the minute he arrived. So yeah, I was completely in the dark. Grace kept talking, filling in all the blanks I hadn't even known existed. She reached for the coffee pot again, probably trying to offer comfort in the only way she knew how, but I gently waved her off. I didn't want more coffee, I just wanted a hot shower and a solid night of sleep. That was all I could manage. Thanks for coming by, Grace, I said softly. Please make sure the door's locked on your way out. When I left the room, I caught a glimpse of her face, brows pulled together in concern, lips pressed tight. She looked worried and I appreciated that, but I needed to be alone. Thank God the boys weren't home. Trying to explain all this would have been a nightmare. Sooner or later they'd have to know, but for now I wanted to hold on to whatever peace I could. I'm not a big shot. Never was. I run the grocery department at the local supermarket. Not exactly the kind of job that turns heads. But I liked it. After a decade of turning down promotions because I didn't want the extra pressure or the long hours, I finally said yes. Maybe it was the emptiness of the house. Maybe I just needed a distraction. Either way, I called up my district supervisor the next morning and told him I was ready to take the manager role. With everything unraveling at home, I decided to move into a small apartment right behind the store. Nothing fancy, just practical. I started going through the house, sorting through everything that no longer served a purpose. Most of it I donated. The local charities were happy to take just about everything off my hands. The first thing I cleared out? The bed. Our bed. That was the easiest call I made. Getting rid of the wedding photos and family portraits came next. That part surprised me. I thought it'd be harder. But it wasn't. I felt a weird sort of peace in letting go. Still, I kept a handful of pictures of the boys. They deserved to be remembered without the shadows of all this mess. Billy gave me a ring a few days later, said he wanted me to come over Sunday and help him barbecue. He always tries to lighten the mood even when it's uncomfortable. He's got this old ball cap with a military insignia stitched on the front, like he's trying to play the part of a seasoned officer. His car even has a license plate with a gold oak leaf. He's never served a day in his life, but he wears it all like a badge. As I finished the last of my beer, Grace came back with a fresh six-pack. She must have known I wasn't done processing all this yet. Billy leaned in, lowering his voice. You know something's off about this guy, right? I looked at him. Jason. Yeah, he nodded. Grace told me he never even finished high school. So how the heck did he wind up an officer? That Mustang program they used to have? It got scrapped years ago. Nowadays you need a college degree just to get commissioned. I didn't say anything, just stared into my beer. Something about all of this didn't add up. Maybe Jason wasn't the golden boy Anna made him out to be. Or maybe he was just good at fooling people. Either way, it made me wonder just how much of the story I was still missing. I wasn't ready for how tough the night shift would be, not just the hours but the challenge of finding people willing to actually show up and do the work. Finding dependable employees for that time slot? Nearly impossible. And even the ones we did hire rarely stuck around. So when Mrs. Sanchez walked into my office, I braced myself. You're not here to file a complaint, are you, Mrs. Sanchez? I asked, half joking. She gave a polite smile, but there was a hint of tension in her eyes. Not exactly a complaint, Mr. Templeton, she said, her tone cautious. But I do need some help. I nodded and motioned for her to continue. I've got 2 teenage boys, 15 and 16. They're both working part-time after school, but we're barely scraping by. And now, it seems like folks around here are starting to talk, saying things about us that aren't true. Her voice wavered a bit, and she looked like she was debating whether to storm out or stick around. Please take a seat, I said calmly. I've got an idea that might help us both. She sat down slowly, clearly not thrilled but curious enough to stay. Here's what I'm thinking, I continued. I'll adjust your shift. Instead of coming in earlier like before, you'll start at 11. That'll give you time to prep the inventory for the overnight crew, who'll arrive at midnight. Then you'll work until 6 in the morning, just in time for the day shift manager to clock in and take over. Maria looked at me skeptically, but I could see her processing it. I was hoping the new setup might give her a little more balance, just enough to catch her breath. When she finally let out a laugh, it was sudden and unexpected. She covered her mouth with her hand, clearly embarrassed. Meanwhile, I just stood there feeling awkward and clumsy, not really sure what was funny but relieved to see a crack in her tension. After a moment I found my voice again. So, if I can't call you Mrs. Sanchez, what should I call you? She smiled for real this time. Just Maria. That name, Maria, sounded warmer somehow. My Sunday morning crew has bailed on me, I said. 2 of my regulars are Southern Baptists, and they refuse to work early shifts on Sundays. That leaves me flying solo. I could really use the help, from 6 a.m. to noon. It'd mean a few extra hours for you if you're interested. She paused, weighing the offer. I'm not asking for a miracle, I said softly. Just a little backup. We both know how easily things can fall apart around here. She gave me a slow nod, and that was that. What I didn't realize back then was that this would be the start of something entirely unexpected. Our first few shifts together were tense. Not unpleasant, just professional. I didn't imagine it would become anything more than that. She was supposed to work Sunday mornings and clock out by noon. But that Sunday? We ended up working side by side until well into the evening. Maria picked up the responsibilities fast. She asked smart questions and paid attention. But more than that, I realized I actually enjoyed being around her. There was something steady in her presence, something that felt easy and familiar, even if we were still strangers in many ways. Later that night, I walked back to my apartment and cracked open a couple of beers. The place wasn't much, just a small space above a repair shop with basic cable and a half-working heater, but it was mine. I had plans to get internet hooked up the following week, which felt like a win. And just when I thought the week couldn't end on a better note, I got a text from Maria. She was inviting me to dinner, with her and her boys. I already had her number saved, but Maria, ever thoughtful, gave it to me again, just in case. The whole situation still felt a bit complicated. Maybe even risky depending on how you looked at it. Workplace relationships always came with a warning label, especially in a company like ours. Still, there we were. Armin and Martin had slipped out quietly, leaving just the 2 of us at the dinner table. I helped her gather the dishes, and once the kitchen was cleared, we finally opened a bottle of wine that had been waiting patiently on the counter. That first real conversation outside of work started off a little stiff. Until now, the only time Maria and I had spoken was in the break room or on the sales floor, quick, professional, polite. But over dinner, with no registers beeping or employees asking for time off, we began to fill in the blanks. At one point I brought it up, the obvious. I don't want to get either of us in trouble, I said, glancing down at my glass. This, us, if there even is an us, could be seen as crossing a line. She looked a little deflated at first, but then smiled with a quiet confidence. I don't think it's that serious, she said. We're adults. If it turns into something, we'll handle it. I nodded, not sure whether I admired her optimism or felt nervous because of it. That night ended with a few more drinks than planned. What started as a couple beers turned into one too many, and Grace eventually had to swing by to collect Billy. Her husband was way past the point of good conversation. The next morning I showed up to work late, not by much but late all the same. No one said a word. As the store manager, I was usually the first to arrive, so the occasional late start wasn't going to raise any eyebrows. Still, it wasn't the best look. But what really caught me off guard was what happened Friday morning. 3 vice presidents from corporate unexpectedly showed up at the store. No warning, no heads up. Just, boom, they were there doing a walkthrough. Their smiles were polite but hollow. You could tell they were here for a reason, and I didn't know yet if I was part of it. Sunday lunch rolled around and I tried to keep it low-key. I knew I had a long drive ahead. I was headed to Maryland that evening for a new training program tied to my promotion. I avoided alcohol, wanting to stay clear-headed, but Billy, ever curious, couldn't help himself. "So what's your plan with Jason and Anna?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not now. One step at a time. First, I settle into this new role. Then I'll figure out what comes next." Despite everything going on, Maria and I were still talking every day, sometimes more than once. It reminded me of being a teenager again, waiting for the phone to ring just to hear her voice. We talked about everything. She asked about my training, I asked about her boys. It was easy, comforting. Honest. Monday morning came and I was ready. I'd ironed my new suit the night before, fueled up my company-issued car, and walked into the club lobby with a strange sense of momentum. For the first time in a long time, it felt like things were falling into place. But that feeling didn't last. My mood dropped the moment I spotted her. Anna. She was standing near the check-in desk, surrounded by a small group of well-dressed women. Tennis racket in hand, a light pink visor pushing her hair back, and a tight little grin that said she knew exactly what she was doing. I froze. I didn't even know she played tennis. The flood of embarrassment hit like a wave. All the old feelings, betrayal, humiliation, confusion, came rushing back in an instant. My hands tightened on the folder I was carrying, and for a second, I felt like that lost man back in our house all over again. She glanced over and caught my eye. "This club is members only," she said with a saccharine smile, loud enough for the others to hear. "You'll need to check in properly." I felt small. The receptionist handed me my welcome packet, a membership card, a key to my locker, and a thick rulebook I wasn't in the mood to read. And just like that, the day I was supposed to start fresh had already taken a hit. I gave a small smile, more out of courtesy than anything else. "Welcome to Liberty Keys Country Club, sir," the young attendant said cheerfully as he handed me my membership packet. I nodded silently, then turned to leave. That's when I caught Linda looking at me with this puzzled expression, like she couldn't quite believe I belonged there. I just gave her a grin, no words, no explanation, and walked straight through the lobby. As the doors swung shut behind me, I had the sudden urge to look back and see what she was doing. But I didn't. Some things are better left unseen. Then there was Cameron Wright. A man parading around in a uniform decorated with medals he never earned. I'd heard whispers about it, and if they were true, it was more than just a poor choice, it was a crime. Stolen valor isn't something this town takes lightly. I had a gut feeling things would go south for him soon enough. Maybe they already were. Back at the apartment, Helen handed me a cup of coffee and said something simple that stuck with me. "You're allowed to smile, you know?" And just like that, I did. An hour later, the realtor called. The house had sold and the closing was scheduled for 2 weeks out. It was a strange relief, like letting go of a weight I hadn't realized I'd been dragging behind me. Not long after, things started unraveling on Linda's side of the fence. Turned out the car she'd been driving was repossessed. Cameron had given her bad checks to make the payments, and she didn't know until the tow truck rolled up. Everything he did was a con. Empty promises, forged signatures, financial lies. A trail of deception catching up to him fast. Grace, always trying to do the right thing, offered Linda a place to stay for a week. But from what I heard, she had no backup plan. No money. Even the savings from her marriage were gone, vanished just like Cameron. Apparently, she wasn't the first person he'd fooled. Maria and I never really talked about her after that. It wasn't a conscious decision, we just moved forward, quietly. The past stayed in the past where it belonged. Eventually the boys returned to college. I don't know if they ever stopped by to see Linda, and I didn't ask. Billy was my best man at the wedding, not that there was much of a wedding to begin with. Just a small civil ceremony at the courthouse. Quick and quiet. Still it felt right. Maria had left her job by then, focusing full-time on home and family. Armin and Martin both left the store around the same time, diving into their studies with fresh focus. I made sure they had what they needed and none of them complained. We weren't rich, but we were figuring it out together. I didn't make a profit from the old house, not even close, but the sale gave us room to breathe. 2 months later, we had just enough footing to feel like maybe, just maybe, we were starting over. As for Linda, I can't say I ever truly forgave her. Not entirely. But something shifted the day she finally admitted it was over. That kind of surrender carries its own quiet form of grace. And maybe, in her own way, she was trying to make peace. Then there's another story, one that still stings when I think about it. Julie. "My God, sweetheart, I didn't realize I hit you that hard," she said, her voice half apology, half panic. "How bad is it?" 7 stitches, I told her, gently rubbing the back of my head. "Julie, what were you thinking? You hit me with a lamp." A solid, heavy one. That could have gone so much worse. I was hoping for remorse. For sympathy. But when she looked at me, there was something else in her eyes. Defiance. Like I'd earned it somehow. What about her birthday? She asked suddenly, like she was accusing me of something I couldn't quite place. There was pain in her voice, but I stayed quiet. I didn't have it in me to argue, not anymore. Some moments don't need more words. It's strange, the things we let happen, the people we let hurt us, the chaos we try to call love. And what does a 39-year-old man get when he tries to give a gift to someone already fighting demons of their own? A silence deeper than any apology could reach. I kept my thoughts to myself, again. No surprise there. Karen had been quietly observing me for months. Not in an obvious way, but steadily, consistently, like someone reading a long book one page at a time. She'd been working here since June retired, my longtime secretary who'd been by my side for over a decade. Karen stepped into her shoes seamlessly, efficient, calm, and with that air of quiet capability you don't teach in training. There was a moment with Julie, a very specific moment, when she realized I was telling the truth. I could see it in her face. The anger she carried like a torch flickered out, and something more familiar took its place: doubt. That kind of doubt that eats away at you after someone you love betrays you. It's not just heartbreak, it's the complete collapse of your sense of reality. One minute, you're confident you know who you're sharing your life with. The next, it's like the floor's been yanked out from beneath you, and you're free falling into a void filled with questions. What did I miss? Where did I go wrong? How could I not have seen this coming? Julie had thrown herself into work since everything blew up. That was her coping mechanism, structure. She stayed late at the office most nights, came home just long enough to reheat whatever I'd left in the kitchen, and disappeared into her study again until the kids were in bed. I usually fell asleep before she resurfaced. Saturdays were more of the same: work, work, and more work. By Sunday she was burnt out, edgy and irritable, like someone stuck in a body that wouldn't let them rest. If every employee at the firm worked with the same intensity as Julie, the company would be unstoppable. But that kind of burnout? It comes with a price. Then there was my own mistake, the one I didn't have the guts to admit out loud yet. I'd been raised to value honesty, and yet I'd violated the most sacred kind, the trust of someone who gave me their heart. There was no excuse, not really. Just an ache where the truth should have been. Julie's expression twisted between pain and something colder, something lost. "Do you even understand what it felt like, Steve?" she asked, breaking the silence. I didn't answer. "I always thought home was supposed to be a safe place," she continued, voice shaking. "I know," I said softly. "And I saw it. I saw her jump out of the bed to stop me from hitting you with that lamp again." Her tone was dry, but her eyes shimmered. "She actually held me back while dialing the police. Do you remember that?" I nodded. I did. She didn't even flinch when I lost control. "That's not normal." Julie gave a hollow laugh. "What was that? Some kind of martial arts training?" I exhaled, rubbing the back of my neck. "Krav Maga. It's what Karen studied. Self-defense mixed with a little street fight instinct. Same stuff they teach in the Israeli army." I guess that's how she stayed calm, even when I didn't. Julie stared at me, reading every line on my face. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, "You've said it before, Steve, how beautiful you think she is." There was something sharp behind those words. She remembered everything. Her eyes drifted, revisiting a memory from years ago. Then she blinked, snapping herself back. "Our dynamics changed," she said firmly. "You don't get to pretend it hasn't." "I'm not pretending," I replied. "I just don't know how to move through it yet." She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "You don't understand what I saw yesterday. What I felt. It broke something in me. Something I'm not sure I can fix." Her voice was steady, but beneath it was a grief that hadn't found its way out yet. Maybe it never would. "I hope it hurts," she said, barely louder than a whisper. "Now you know what it feels like." Julie was sitting across from me, her voice tight, her eyes tired. There was a flicker of something in her expression. Was it regret? Vindication? "We can buy a new mattress together," she added weakly. Like that would fix anything. I wasn't sure how to respond. Part of me wanted to laugh at the absurdity of that suggestion. Another part wondered if this was her way of trying to pull us back to some version of normal. But all I could think about was how I'd been attacked, physically and emotionally, by someone I used to trust with everything. And I still carried the scars. But saying that out loud would have been too easy. Too petty. Instead, I leaned in slightly. "I still have questions, Julie. So many questions." Her eyes flicked up, hesitant. "Where were you going to meet Mark?" I asked. Her hands trembled, slapping the table as she nearly dropped her head forward, struggling to compose herself. What are you talking about?" she stammered. "I know," I said, not shouting but close. The rage I'd buried came roaring back. Watching the recordings had stirred it up again. The betrayal, the lies, the intimate moments she thought were hidden from me. My pain hadn't dulled. If anything, it had sharpened into something icy and precise. Karen had been there when I uncovered it all. Her reaction was immediate, pure anger, righteous and unfiltered. When I showed her the messages, the videos, the timestamps, she didn't hold back. It mirrored what I felt. And for the first time I didn't feel alone. Her support mattered. Not just because she believed me, but because she understood the depth of the betrayal. The consequences. The damage. "I know what this kind of deception does," I told Julie. "It eats away at your sense of self. At your ability to trust. It tears up your home, your family. It turned me into someone I hardly recognize." Her face softened. She reached for my hand under the table and gave it a desperate squeeze. Before I could say anything, the guard walked over, clearing his throat. "No physical contact," he barked. "I let it slide once, Mrs. Brown. Don't test me again." Julie slowly pulled her hand back, eyes glistening. And then I saw it, her realization. Not just of what she'd done, but what it had cost her. She looked at me not as a man she'd once wronged, but as the one person who could have spared her. And I hadn't. Because I didn't. When everything fell apart, I didn't shield her. I didn't cover up the assault or soften the reports. I handed over the footage. I gave my statement. And I brought Karen with me as a witness. It wasn't revenge. It was survival. But I knew what it meant. It meant Julie was now at the bottom of every priority list. Legal aid, financial support, everything. I watched the woman I once chased, once built a life with, crumble under the weight of consequences she never expected to face. "You're getting divorced, Julie," I said. "You messed up. But don't give up. If you still want the girls in your life, don't lie to yourself. Admit the truth. Own it. Fight for what's left." She nodded slowly, saying nothing. I could see the fight was still somewhere in her, buried beneath the shame. "I'll do what I can to make sure they see you again," I added quietly. "But you've got to meet them halfway." There was a long silence between us. She didn't try to defend herself. Not anymore. Then I stood, my voice low but clear. "Goodbye, Julie. I loved you." I turned without waiting for a reply. The guard stepped aside and I walked briskly through the visitor's room, the door clicking shut behind me. I didn't look back. Outside the wind felt different. Colder. Sharper. But it also felt clean.